The Zephyrian delegation. In the grand halls of the Galactic Assembly, representatives from countless alien civilizations gathered to discuss matters of cosmic importance. Amidst the towering crystalline spires and shimmering holograms, a small delegation of Zephyrians huddled together, their iridescent scales flickering nervously under the ambient light. The Zephyrians were a peaceful race, known for their advanced empathic abilities and their skill in mediating conflicts. Yet, despite their valuable contributions to the galactic community, they often found themselves overshadowed by the larger, more influential races. As the assembly commenced, the Zephyrian ambassador, a slender figure draped in flowing robes, stepped forward to address the gathered representatives. Esteemed members of the Galactic Assembly, the ambassador began, their melodic voice barely audible above the murmurs of the crowd. We come before you today to discuss the recent incursions on our borders by the Krell Empire. We seek a diplomatic solution, one that will ensure lasting peace for all. But the ambassador's words were cut short by a booming laugh from the Krell delegation. "Peace," sneered the Krell leader, his razor-sharp teeth glinting menacingly. "Your pitiful race knows nothing of peace. You exist only because we allow it." The Zephyrians recoiled, their scales dimming in a display of collective sorrow and fear. It was a scene that had played out countless times before, the mighty and the powerful dismissing the concerns of the small and the vulnerable. An unexpected arrival. As the assembly descended into chaos, with the Krell and their allies trading barbs with the Zephyrians and their few supporters, a hush suddenly fell over the room. All eyes turned to the entrance, where a group of unfamiliar beings had emerged. They were bipedal, with smooth, hairless skin and eyes that shone with a strange, intense light. Their clothing was simple yet functional, adorned with patches and insignia that none of the assembled races recognized. "Greetings," spoke the leader of the newcomers, a tall, broad-shouldered individual with a voice that commanded attention. "We are the humans, and we come in peace." A ripple of confusion and surprise spread through the assembly. Humans? None had heard of this race before. Some of the delegates even wondered if this was some sort of prank or illusion. The human leader continued, undaunted by the reactions of the crowd. "We have journeyed far across the stars to seek friendship and cooperation with the galactic community. We may be new to this stage, but we bring with us a spirit of unity, innovation, and determination." As the humans spoke, the Zephyrian ambassador felt a glimmer of hope stir within their chest. Perhaps in these strange newcomers, they might find an ally against the overwhelming might of the Krell and their ilk. An unlikely friendship. In the days that followed, as the assembly broke into smaller working groups to discuss various issues, the Zephyrian ambassador found themselves gravitating towards the human delegation. There was something about their earnest curiosity and their willingness to listen that drew the Zephyrian in. The human leader, who introduced himself as Admiral Zahn, was particularly intrigued by the Zephyrians and their unique abilities. "Your people have a gift," he remarked to the ambassador during a brief recess. "The ability to sense and influence emotions, to foster empathy and understanding. That is a rare and precious thing." The ambassador bowed their head graciously. "You are kind to say so, Admiral, but I fear our gifts are of little use in the face of raw power and aggression." Jan's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. "Ah, but that is where you are wrong, my friend. True power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to create, to bring people together, to find common ground and build something greater than the sum of its parts." As the two continued to talk, sharing stories of their respective cultures and histories, a bond began to form between them. It was a friendship forged in the crucible of adversity, a partnership of underdogs against a galaxy that seemed stacked against them. The seeds of change. In the weeks that followed, the Zephyrian-human alliance began to bear fruit. The two delegations worked tirelessly behind the scenes, reaching out to other small and marginalized races, building a coalition of the willing and the overlooked. They faced resistance at every turn, from the Krell and their proxies who sought to undermine their efforts, to the apathetic and the cynical who believed that change was impossible. But still they persisted, driven by a shared vision of a galaxy where all voices could be heard, where cooperation and understanding could triumph over division and fear. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the tide began to turn. More and more delegations flocked to the banner of the Zephyrian Human Alliance, drawn by the promise of a new way forward. Even some of the larger, more established races began to take notice, whispering amongst themselves about the strange power of these upstart underdogs. As the assembly drew to a close, the Zephyrian ambassador and Admiral Zahn stood side by side, watching as the delegates filed out of the great hall. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there would be countless challenges and obstacles ahead. But they also knew that they had sparked something powerful, something that could not be easily extinguished. A flame of hope and unity that would light the way forward, even in the darkest of times. The galactic underdogs had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Quantum Prophecy. In the aftermath of the Galactic Assembly, Admiral Zahn and the Zephyrian ambassador found themselves drawn into a web of intrigue and mystery. Late one night, as they shared a pot of Zephyrian tea in the ambassador's quarters, a cloaked figure slipped into the room, startling them both. "Forgive the intrusion," whispered the figure, lowering her hood to reveal the face of an elderly Zephyrian female. "But I bring urgent news that cannot wait." The ambassador's eyes widened in recognition. "Priestess Xanthi, what brings you here at this hour?" Xanthi's gaze shifted between the ambassador and Zahn, her expression grave. "I have had a vision, a glimpse of a future that threatens us all. An ancient prophecy, long hidden, speaks of a great calamity that will befall the galaxy, a darkness that will consume everything in its path." Zahn leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "A prophecy. Can you tell us more?" The priestess nodded, her eyes distant. "The prophecy speaks of a convergence, a coming together of two unlikely allies, one of scales and one of flesh. Only together can they hope to unravel the secrets of the quantum cipher and prevent the calamity from unfolding." The ambassador and Zahn exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They knew instinctively that the prophecy spoke of their own unlikely partnership. The cipher's trail. In the days that followed, the human Zephyrian team threw themselves into the task of deciphering the quantum cipher. They pored over ancient texts and artifacts, seeking any clue that might lead them to the cipher's location. As they worked, they found themselves drawn into a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with unknown enemies dogging their every step. Shadowy figures lurked in the corners of their vision, and mysterious accidents plagued their efforts. Yet, despite the obstacles in their path, Zahn and the ambassador pressed on, driven by a sense of urgency and purpose. They knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and that they alone held the key to its salvation. A fractal revelation. Their breakthrough came on a remote, windswept moon, where an ancient Zephyrian temple lay hidden beneath the surface. As they picked their way through the crumbling ruins, Zahn's keen eye spotted a pattern in the fractured mosaics that adorned the walls, a pattern that matched the intricate halls and spirals of the quantum cipher. With trembling hands, the ambassador traced the lines of the mosaic, their scales shimmering with anticipation. As they did so, a hidden chamber opened before them, revealing a shimmering, multifaceted crystal that pulsed with an otherworldly light. "The quantum core," breathed Xanthi, her eyes wide with wonder. "The heart of the cipher, the key to unlocking its secrets." But as they reached for the core, a blast of energy knocked them back, sending them sprawling to the ground. A figure emerged from the shadows, a Krell warrior clad in battle armor, his eyes blazing with malice. "Fools," he snarled, leveling his weapon at the stunned team. "Did you think you could keep this power for yourselves? The quantum core belongs to the Krell, and we will use it to bring the galaxy to its knees." As the warrior advanced, Zahn and the ambassador exchanged a desperate glance. They knew they were outmatched, that they had no hope of defeating the Krell in combat. But they also knew that they could not let the core fall into enemy hands. In a burst of inspiration, Zahn grabbed the ambassador's hand and pulled them towards the core. Together, he whispered, his voice fierce with determination. We do this together, or not at all. As their hands closed around the core, a blinding light engulfed them, and the world fell away. They felt themselves hurtling through a vortex of swirling colors and shapes, their minds assaulted by a cacophony of alien sensations and emotions. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. They found themselves standing in a vast, empty expanse, the core still clutched tightly in their hands. Before them, a shimmering apparition took form, a being of pure energy and light. Welcome, spoke the apparition, its voice echoing through the void. You have passed the first test, proving yourselves worthy of the Sci-Fi's secrets. But the true challenge still lies ahead. To prevent the calamity, you must first understand its origins, and the role that your two races must play in the coming crisis. The ambassador and Zahn looked at each other, their expressions a mix of fear and determination. They knew that the path before them was fraught with danger and uncertainty, that the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. But they also knew that they had each other, and the strength of their unlikely bond. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and fight to restore balance and peace to a fractured galaxy. The quantum prophecy had been set in motion, and the galactic underdogs were ready to meet their destiny head-on. Echoes of eternity. As Admiral Zahn and the Zephyrian ambassador stood in the presence of the shimmering apparition, they felt a wave of awe and trepidation wash over them. The being's words echoed in their minds, hinting at a truth that had long been hidden from the galaxy. To understand the calamity that threatens us all, the apparition began, you must first know the story of the Eternals, the ancient race that once guided the cosmos towards balance and harmony. The apparition waved its hand, and the void around them shimmered and shifted, coalescing into a breathtaking vista of swirling galaxies and glittering star systems. In the time before time, the Eternals served as the guardians of the universe, wielding the power of the quantum cipher to maintain the delicate equilibrium between the forces of creation and destruction. As the apparition spoke, images of towering ethereal beings flashed before Zahn and the ambassador's eyes, their forms shimmering with an iridescent light. They watched as the Eternals wove intricate patterns in the fabric of reality, their movements as precise and graceful as a cosmic dance. But even the Eternals were not immune to the lure of power. The apparition continued, its voice tinged with sorrow. One of their own, a being known as Nihilus, became consumed by a desire for dominion over all of creation. In his madness, he sought to unravel the cipher and remake the universe in his own image. The scene before them shifted, showing a dark figure standing amidst a sea of shattered stars and collapsing galaxies. Nihilus's form was a twisted mockery of the Eternal's grace, his eyes burning with an insatiable hunger. To stop Nihilus, the remaining Eternals sacrificed themselves, shattering the quantum cipher into countless fragments and scattering them across the cosmos. They hoped that, in doing so, they could prevent the calamity that Nihilus sought to unleash. The apparition's gaze fixed upon Zahn and the ambassador, its voice urgent and insistent. But now, the fragments of the cipher are being gathered once more by those who seek to resurrect Nihilus and bring about the end of all things. The Krell are but pawns in this game, unwitting servants of a darker power. The Spectre's Gambit. John's mind raced as he struggled to process the revelations. But what can we do? He asked, his voice tight with tension. How can we hope to stop something as powerful as Nihilus? The apparition's form shimmered, and for a moment, Zahn thought he saw a flicker of doubt cross its features. There is one way, it said at last, its voice hesitant, but it will require a sacrifice, a willingness to risk everything for the sake of the galaxy. The ambassador stepped forward, their scales glinting with determination. We will do whatever it takes, they declared, their voice ringing with conviction. The Zephyrians have always been the guardians of peace and harmony. We cannot stand idly by while the universe faces annihilation. The apparition nodded, a glimmer of hope in its eyes. Very well. To stop Nihilus, you must gather the remaining fragments of the quantum cipher and use them to rebuild the Spectre's Gambit, an ancient weapon capable of unmaking even the most powerful of beings. John frowned, a sense of unease growing in the pit of his stomach. The Spectre's Gambit. I've never heard of such a thing. Few have, the apparition replied, its voice grim. The Gambit was a closely guarded secret of the Eternals, a weapon of last resort to be used only in the most dire of circumstances. It has the power to unmake the very fabric of reality itself, to erase a being from existence entirely. The ambassador's eyes widened, their scales rippling with a mix of awe and fear. And you believe this weapon can stop Nihilus? The apparition's form began to fade, its voice growing distant. It is the only way. But be warned, the path ahead will be fraught with danger and deception. Trust no one, not even those who claim to be your allies. The fate of the galaxy rests on your shoulders, galactic underdogs. May the cipher guide your path. The fragments of fate. With a final shimmer, the apparition vanished, leaving Zahn and the ambassador alone in the void. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the weight of their newfound knowledge pressing down upon them like a physical burden. Well, John said at last, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. It seems we have our work cut out for us. The ambassador nodded, their expression grim. Indeed, but we cannot falter now. The galaxy is counting on us. Together, they turned their gaze to the stars, their minds already racing with plans and possibilities. They knew that the path ahead would be treacherous, that they would face enemies and obstacles at every turn. But they also knew that they had each other and the strength of their bond. They were the galactic underdogs, the unlikely heroes who held the fate of the universe in their hands. And they would not rest until the cipher was whole once more, and the spectre of Nihilus was banished forever from the cosmos. The shattered stars. Admiral Zahn and the Zephyrian ambassador set out on their quest to gather the fragments of the quantum cipher, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of the sacrifices that lay ahead. They knew that they would have to navigate a treacherous web of alliances and betrayals, facing enemies both known and unknown. Their first stop was the shattered remains of the Eridani system, a once thriving hub of galactic commerce that had been reduced to rubble in the wake of a cataclysmic war. As they picked their way through the debris field, dodging the twisted remnants of starships and satellites, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. There, the ambassador said suddenly, their scales shimmering with excitement. I can feel it, the presence of a cipher fragment. It's close. John followed their gaze to a massive, derelict warship that loomed before them, its hull pockmarked with scars and blast marks. The Eridani dreadnought, he breathed, his eyes widening with recognition. It was the pride of the system's defense fleet, said to be undefeatable in battle. As they approached the ship, a sense of unease settled over them like a shroud. The dreadnought was dark and lifeless, its once gleaming corridors now choked with dust and debris. But as they ventured deeper into the vessel, they began to hear sounds that sent chills down their spines. The clank of metal on metal, the hiss of hydraulics, and the unmistakable thrum of power cores coming to life. Betrayal in the depths. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a Zephyrian clad in the distinctive armor of the Galactic Council's elite guard. Ambassador, the figure said, their voice cold and mocking. I had hoped to find you here. The ambassador's scales rippled with shock and confusion. Commander Zarix, what are you doing here? Zarix's eyes glinted with malice as he stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma blade. Isn't it obvious? I'm here to stop you from completing your foolish quest. The cipher fragments are too powerful to be trusted in the hands of weaklings like you. Jan's hand dropped to his own weapon, his eyes narrowing. You're working with the Krell, aren't you? You're one of Nihilus's pawns. Zarix laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the empty corridors. Nihilus, you think too small, human. I serve a higher power, one that will bring order and stability to the galaxy, not the chaos and destruction that your kind craves. With a snarl, Zarix lunged forward, his blade flashing in the dim light. Zam met him head-on, his own weapons sparking to life as they clashed in a blaze of plasma and fury. The ambassador, meanwhile, raced deeper into the ship, their senses guiding them towards the Sci-Fi fragment. They could feel it calling to them, its power pulsing like a beacon in the darkness. But as they reached the fragment's location, they found themselves faced with a terrible choice. The fragment was embedded in the dreadnought's power core, its energies intertwined with the ship's vital systems. To remove it would be to condemn the ship and everyone on board to certain destruction. The price of power. For a long moment, the ambassador hesitated, their scales shimmering with indecision. They knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, that the Sci-Fi was the key to stopping Nihilus and his dark master. But they also knew that they could not sacrifice innocent lives, not even for the greater good. With a heavy heart, they made their choice. Reaching out with their empathic abilities, they poured their own life force into the fragment, using their energy to disentangle it from the ship's systems. They felt their strength draining away, their scales dulling and their limbs growing heavy. But as the fragment came free, they knew that they had made the right choice. They clutched it tightly to their chest, feeling its power thrumming through their veins like liquid fire. Zan, meanwhile, had managed to disarm Zarex, sending the traitor's blades skittering across the deck. But as he turned to check on the ambassador, he felt a surge of horror and despair wash over him. The ambassador lay crumpled on the floor, their scales grey and lifeless. In their hand, the Sci-Fi fragment pulsed with an eerie, sickly light. "No," Jan whispered, dropping to his knees beside his fallen friend. "No, please, not like this." But even as he gathered the ambassador's body in his arms, he knew that their sacrifice had not been in vain. They had secured the first fragment of the Sci-Fi, and with it, a glimmer of hope for the galaxy. The path ahead would be long and treacherous, fraught with danger and heartbreak. But Jean knew that he could not falter now, not when the fate of everything hung in the balance. He would carry on the ambassador's legacy, gathering the remaining fragments and rebuilding the Spectre's gambit. He would face Nihilus and his dark master, and he would destroy them both, no matter the cost. For he was a galactic underdog, and he would not rest until the galaxy was safe once more. The cosmic crucible. Admiral Zahn stood on the bridge of his ship, the reassembled fragments of the quantum Sci-Fi pulsing with an otherworldly light in his hands. The Spectre's gambit was complete, a weapon of unimaginable power that thrummed with the energy of 1,000 suns. But even as he prepared to face Nihilus and his dark master, Jean couldn't shake the weight of the sacrifices that had brought him to this moment. The Zephyrian ambassador, his dearest friend and ally, had given their life to secure the first fragment, and in the battles that followed, countless others had fallen, their blood staining the stars. Now, as he stared out at the roiling chaos of the Maelstrom Nebula, Jean knew that the final confrontation was at hand. Nihilus's fortress loomed before him, a twisted monument to madness and despair. The dark revelation. As Zahn's ship pierced the outer defenses of the fortress, a voice echoed through his mind, a presence that sent chills down his spine. "Welcome, Admiral," the voice purred, its tone dripping with malice. "I have been waiting for you." Jan's eyes widened as a figure materialized on the bridge, a being of pure darkness and shadow. "Nihilus," he breathed, his grip tightening on the Spectre's gambit. But the figure only laughed, a sound that seemed to swallow the light itself. "Nihilus. No, you foolish human. I am the one who pulled his strings, the one who set this all in motion. I am the void eternal, the darkness that hungers for all of creation." Jan felt a wave of despair wash over him as he realized the true scope of the threat he faced. The void eternal was no mere madman or tyrant, but a primordial force of destruction, an entity that sought to unmake the very fabric of reality. The Spectre's sacrifice. But even in the face of this revelation, Jan refused to surrender. He charged forward, the Spectre's gambit blazing with power as he unleashed its fury upon the void eternal. The battle was titanic, a clash of cosmic forces that shook the very foundations of the universe. Zahn poured every ounce of his strength and will into the gambit, channeling the hopes and dreams of every soul in the galaxy. And for a moment, it seemed as though he might prevail. The void eternal reeled back, its form flickering and wavering under the onslaught of the gambit's power. But then, with a final, desperate surge of energy, the entity lashed out, its tendrils of darkness seeking to envelop Zahn and the gambit alike. Zahn felt the weapon's power begin to falter, its light dimming as the void eternal's hunger threatened to consume them both. In that moment, Zahn knew what he had to do. With a final defiant cry, he turned the gambit upon himself, pouring every last ounce of his own life force into the weapon. The gambit flared with a blinding, incandescent light, a supernova of pure, unbridled energy that consumed the void eternal and Zahn alike. The legacy endures. When the light faded, the fortress was gone, reduced to nothing more than a scattering of dust and echoes. And amidst the debris, a single gleaming object tumbled end over end, the quantum cipher, whole and unblemished. In the years that followed, the galaxy would remember Admiral Zahn and the Zephyrian ambassador as the heroes who had saved them all, the galactic underdogs who had stood against the darkness and prevailed. Their story would be told and retold, a legend passed down from generation to generation. And though the galaxy would face new challenges and threats in the centuries to come, it would always remember the lesson of the underdogs, that hope and unity could overcome even the deepest darkness, and that the light of courage and sacrifice would never be extinguished. For in the end, the legacy of the galactic underdogs would endure, a shining beacon of inspiration and resilience for all those who looked to the stars and dreamed of a better tomorrow.